Okay, go ahead and grab your artificial sinew, put your whip in the vise, and basically, we're going to cut off 1 inch. So that should be right about where the lowest knot is from finding the middles of the strands. So just find the one that comes down the farthest on the handle, and you're going to bind off with the sinew just below that. And you want to pull this as tight as you can. Okay, so just give it a few wraps there, and then grab a thread if you have some paracord gut or something. Should mention, just always keep a thread handy for binding. Just lay that in there and give it a couple more tight wraps. And then just cut it. Put it through the loop and pull the loop out. And you can trim that. Okay, so now we're going to cut this off. You can start by taking a razor blade and cut the paracord around it. Try to get this to focus. Okay, so we're just going to cut just above the binding. And you're just going to cut around the handle a little ways till you reach the steel handle. And then, of course, you'll take your hacksaw or whatever you cut the steel with and just cut it off flush with the rest of this, but it helps to take some of the paracord off. Gets in the way. Okay, so now we'll go ahead and take our saw and cut it off flush with the end of that, and then we can melt it off. And now we'll just melt the ends of all this and press it in. So have something flat to press it. Just get everything melted. And then press it. And now we are done with the with the actual overlay of the whip. All that's left now is to do the heel knot and the transition knot if you want one, and then tie on the cracker. Okay, so now we're going to roll the overlay of the whip. This is obviously very important to make it look nice. So make sure that the floor you're rolling it on is clean. You don't want any dirt to get in it. And I also want to say, if you have your board, I'd recommend getting some Plasti Dip. You can get it in a liquid form or a spray, an aerosol like a spray paint, and spray your board with it. It gives it a rubber coating, so it gives it much better grip for rolling, and it's also easier to clean because you want to make sure your board is very clean when you roll it. So go ahead and roll the overlay then. And just make sure you put your whole body weight into it. And once you get down to the thinner part of the whip, you don't need to put as much weight into it, because if you put too much, it'll kind of smash it and it won't roll. So do just enough to where it rolls. And if you want your fall hitch to look extra nice, just kind of tap it with the board all the way around, because obviously you can't roll it like the rest of the whip, but you can just tap it like this. Give it a nice rounded look. Okay, so take your piece of paracord and you're just going to lay it across diagonally like this, and you're going to go around the back and then cross over the front to make an X. Okay, just like that. Then you're going to come around the back again, and you're going to go over this strand and under this. Okay, make sure you pull out any twists. Okay, so this is what you should have right now. And then come around the back again. And we're going to come up under this here. So this is where our strand started, and it goes under this strand. We're going to go under it too, just on the right side of it. Just like that. Okay, so next you're gonna come up, we're gonna cross over top of this strand, okay, and then we're gonna come down, and you're gonna want to reach around, find this strand here. See how this strand comes underneath this strand? Well, we're gonna go under this strand here. Okay, so it seems kind of sloppy right now, but it'll work itself out in the end. So then once you've done that, come around the back again, and then we're going to go over this strand, the one that crossed over the one we started at. We're going to go over this and then under this strand. Okay, so just like that. And the tricky part about tying your first few Turk's head knots is the strands try to slide all over the place and you get confused. So you need to determine what strands to go under and over by looking at the strands around. So I know to go under this one because the strand I went under goes under other ones as well. And in the end, we want the knot to be crisscrossed all the way around. Each strand always goes over, under, the whole way around the knot. Okay, so once you've come up through there, we're going to turn this around. And then next we're going to, we just came out here, so we're going to cross over this strand, because see, this strand goes over top of one, so we're going to go over top this strand. Okay, just like that. And then we're going to come under what this strand we're going over. There's a strand that goes under it, and we're going to go under that strand on the other side. So cross over this strand and then come under the next strand. Okay. And then after that one, we're going to go over this strand. See how this strand is loose? It's going over a whole bunch of strands. We're going to go over that. And then down here, this strand, you can see it's under two strands. We're going to bring that up to the surface and go under it. Okay, now come around to the front and come under where we had originally started. Okay, and that is a 5x4 Turk's head knot. That's one pass. Okay, so depending on the size of your knot foundation, the average is about 2 pass. So going around once is 1 pass. So this is going to be a 2 pass 5x4 Turk's head knot. So what you're going to do next, or for the rest of this knot, you're just going to follow the lead strand. Okay, so this strand goes all the way around. That's our 1 pass. We're just going to follow it the whole way around on the right side and do everything it does. So it goes over, we're going to cross over. Comes up here and goes under, we're going to go under. Okay, we're just basically making it wider. So it goes over, comes around, and goes under, so we're going to go under. And just continue this the whole way around the knot. Again, make sure you don't have to pull anything real tight just yet. We'll tighten everything at the end of the knot. Okay, so we've made our second full pass. I'm just going to come under this one more time as if we're going to do a third pass. But then I'm just going to go ahead and stop there. And that's a 2-pass 5x4 Turk's head knot. Now there's some gaps because I left it loose, but we're going to, tighten everything up. So you can go ahead and take your lacing needle off. And basically all that we're going to do now is follow the entire knot, starting from the bottom. Grip this strand, and you're just going to pull it along the way. You're just going to follow it, and from each pass just pull it tight to pull all the slack out. Okay, so just follow this through the whole knot. And again, you can make these knots as many passes as you want. I've done some knots where I do 4 passes, so there's 4 strands throughout the whole knot. Depends how big you want your knot. Sometimes, if you end up with a knot even after you pull it tight and there's still a lot of gaps, then you might need to do an extra pass. That's fine. Or maybe even, if you only want to do 1 pass, if the knot looks too crowded. And you can also make your knot foundations. You can build it up a lot with more artificial sinew to make it bigger and bulkier. So just pull it tight the whole way around. You can see how much slack we're getting out of this. So this is definitely a necessary step. Make sure as you're tightening it that it's covering your knot foundation, it's not sticking out. And make sure the strands aren't laying on top of each other, especially on the ends. Like this here, it's still loose. I'm going to fix that when I come around to it. And then of course after we finish this knot, once we singe the ends, we're going to roll it, just like anything else with the whip. And try to avoid twists in your strand. You want to adjust that. Okay, see here, this is trying to lay on top of the other strand, so I need to work it a little bit. Just trying to get this last twist out of this strand here. This can be a little tricky sometimes. Okay, there we go. Now you can see how much better that looks. So just check your knot, make sure it's tight like you want it. You may notice there might be a tiny gap here and there, like right there, for example. If it's just that tiny, just try to adjust it. And again, we'll be rolling this, so that'll flatten the strands out as well. Just kind of shape it the way you want it. So then we'll just go ahead and cut these strands and trim them. Okay, so just give these two strands a good tug. Make sure they're good and tight. And I just like to cut one at a time. Make sure leave about a millimeter sticking out the top. Okay, something like that. And go ahead and melt it. And just lick your finger and press it in. Okay, and we'll do the same with the other strand. Cut it, leaving about a millimeter sticking out the top. And you want to be careful that you don't melt the rest of your whip when you're doing this. If you have a wood burner, that's actually probably the best way to melt strands, so you know that there's not an open flame damaging the rest of your whip. But you know, the more you do it with a lighter or a match, the better you get. So now this knot is ready to be rolled. Okay, so I've rolled the knot now, and you can see it turned out much better than before it was rolled. So now we're ready to begin the heel knot. Okay, now we're ready to start the heel knot foundation for the whips. So what you're going to go ahead and get your leather, and the leather I'm using is just an old belt I cut up, and it's 1/8 of an inch thick, and you know, each whip, depending on how you make it, is going to be a little different from each whip. How big you need to cut your leather. For mine, I found that an inch wide and about 2 3/4 inches long. That seems to work best for my whips. So just make sure, you know, take your leather, wrap it around the whip, the end of the whip here, and when you wrap it, get it to fit just about like that. You want there to be a small gap, because we're going to be binding it very tight with some sinew, so you want it, you can see as I put more pressure it closes in more, and that's about where you want it. So just go ahead and, you know, take frequent measurements with your leather and get it to fit exactly to your whip. And then of course, if you're doing 2 whips, you should have the ends of each handle the same, so try to get your leather the same, because when the heel knots of your whips are different, it feels a lot different, even though the rest of the whip might be the same, and that can actually be very uncomfortable. Okay, so at this point we're going to put the whip in the vise and bind it on with the artificial sinew. Okay, so go ahead and put your whip in the vise. Okay, and get your artificial sinew and your leather. And It's actually easier to get a strip of tape just to temporarily hold it on, because it's tricky to just start it with the artificial sinew. So I usually like to give it one wrap and then put the leather in and just wrap it on like that. It just makes it easier to get it bound on exactly the way you need it. Make sure that when you put the leather on, that the end here is flat, and check the crease here to make sure that it's round all the way, because when you put your leather on, get it closer here, when it wraps around, you don't want it to shift like that or anything. So just check for that and trim it if you need to. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and bind it with the sinew. And you're going to want to do this as tight as you can. This isn't going to be what's permanently holding it. The staples will, but this will be, I guess you could say, it's secondary means of holding it on. And it also builds it up a little bit, because you don't, with this type of leather, the way I make my whips, the leather by itself isn't quite thick enough by itself, but once I get this artificial sinew on it, give it a few wraps, it makes just the right diameter for me. Okay, so go ahead and cut it and just press it in itself, because I'm going to be wrapping it more later. Just get rid of this thread here. Okay, so go ahead and do that, and then we'll put the nails or staples in. Okay, so there's two ways you can do this. If you have a stapler gun, this is the best way to do it. The staples I'm using are 3/8 inch or 10 millimeter. That seems to work best for me. If you don't have one of these, then you'll need a pair of channel locks and the small nails. Okay, and what you're gonna do is put your whip in the vise and take the nail and get an approximate measurement. See how long you need it until it would hit the steel rod, and you're going to cut that much off. So I would cut just this tip off here, and then what I do is put the whip in the vise and take the nail, push it in the top of the whip, and take your channel locks and just squeeze it in. You could get some pliers and just hold it on top and squeeze with your hand, but that's really bad for your hand, so it's a lot better with the channel locks just to squeeze that in. But I won't be doing that. Like I said, the stapler is much quicker, so just going to go ahead and put these in. And if you're doing the nails and the channel locks, put 2 in lined up, and you're going to do that on 4 sides. So 2 here, 2 in the bottom, 2 on the left side, and 2 on the right. but since these staples are doubled anyway, you only need one in each side. Okay, and then just tap those in with a hammer to get them nice and flat. Okay. And I'm gonna give this a few more wraps of artificial sinew. So at this point, basically, the only reason I'm wrapping with artificial sinew is to build the foundation up a little, give it a little more diameter, not too much though. And if there's any differences in diameter, of course, to even it out. Noticing the bottom of this foundation is a little bit thinner than the top, so I'm going to give that a couple extra wraps. And the nice thing about artificial sinew is because it's waxed, when you build it up, you can kind of shape it and mold it a little bit, like modeling clay or something. Now when you're building a knot foundation, you can do it so that it's the same diameter all the way, or you can have a little bulge in the middle to make it rounder. Of course, you don't want to do that too much, but it depends what you like better. I like to have it flat and even the whole way. So next what we're going to do is we're going to put some paracord on the end of this, and well, this will depend on what knot you do. You can do either a 5x4 like we did here, which will actually close up the end of this, or we can do a 7x6 Turk's head knot, and if you're not familiar with that, it actually leaves the end open, so you can put some sort of concho in there or something. So what I like to do, almost all my whips have a paracord spiral going around, and you'll see what that looks like here in a second. So I'm going to go ahead and show you how I do that, and then of course you can decide if you want to do that or not. Okay, so for the end of the whip, if you're going to do a 7x6 Turk's head knot, this is the spiral disc that I put in the end. Okay, so you're going to want to get either 1 or 2 strands, depending on if you want to do a 1 color spiral or 2 or even 3. I'm going to be doing red and blue, so I cut each of the strands about 13 inches just to be on the safe side. So whether you use 1 or 2 strands, what you want to do is take and melt the end or ends of both of your strands, and you're going to want either needle nose pliers or your hemostats, and if you're using 2 colors, put them together, and you're going to melt the ends good to where there's they catch on fire themselves. And then you're just gonna wrap it around itself. Try to get it before it hardens. And I didn't get mine done in time. So this step can be very tricky. So I'm just going to have to start over. Need to do this very quickly. There we go. So you can see there, once it melted, I just started wrapping it around itself. Make sure you wait until it cools and hardens. And then you can take your hemostats or pliers out. So you should now have a tiny disc, and just keep spiraling it until it's the same diameter as the end of your whip handle. And I should have mentioned before, you're going to need preferably a glue gun. You don't need anything permanent, because after we tie the knot on and wax it and everything, this disc will be held in place. But I like to use the glue gun. Just, it's quick and easy to get it temporarily held on while I work with it. So go ahead, make sure as you're doing it you keep it good and tight. And I'm going to check it on the end of the handle. It's a little bit too big. Okay, so next I'm going to get my glue gun. So now you're just gonna temporarily put some hot glue to keep this spiral from unraveling. This is a cheap glue gun, but it gets the job done. Just enough to hold it. And don't worry if the hot glue gets all over your spiral disc. All you have to do is quickly put a flame over it and it'll melt that away. So here's the disc so far. Trying to get this to focus. So now what we're going to do is we're going to cut these end strands, and you want to taper them. Okay, so the strand on the bottom ends first, so we can do one strand at a time. So you're just going to melt it and then press it into itself. Now if you're doing two different colors, for some reason paracord of different colors don't like to fuse together very well, so this part can be tricky. But anyway, this is what it should look like once you're done. And again, don't worry about the hot glue. Now at this point, get your whip handle and your glue gun. Just put a bunch of hot glue on the end of the handle and then put your disc on. You just pile it on there. Okay, and if you want, you can get some super glue. If you want to really give it a good hold, get some super glue and put a few drops in. This is actually plastic model cement, but it works. So when you melt paracord, it turns and hardens into a plastic, so why shouldn't plastic model cement work? Okay, so next I'm going to just give it a couple wraps of electrical tape, so that way whenever I put on the actual knot, it doesn't, the lacing needle doesn't catch on it or anything like that. So it's just to make it, the process easier of tying the knot. So you don't want to pull it tight or anything. Okay, so just something like that to get up to the edge so it's smooth. Okay, so now we're ready to tie on the Turk's head knot. Okay, so for the heel knot, as I said before, you can do either a 5x4 or a 7x6. Now, of course, there's a lot more knots, but these are the two most common that I always use. This is what a 5x4 looks like on the end of a whip. I did red and black, and you can see the end is closed. So that's what that looks like. Now a 7x6, this knot is not quite done. I still have to trim the ends, but this is what it looks like at the end. And you can see it leaves the end open, so therefore you can see your spiral or any other concho you want to add in there. So I like this 7x6 much better. You can do either one you want, but basically to make a 7x6, you tie a 5x4 and then expand it. Because if you notice on a 5x4, the full name is 5 lead 4 bite, and 4 bites it's because on the top here you have 4 corners, if you will. And it's like that on this end and on the other end of the knot. You just can't really tell, obviously, because it's around the body of the whip. But that's what we did here, a 5x4. There's 4 bites on each end, or 4 corners. So a 7 lead 6 bite means that there's 6 corners or sides on here. So I'm going to show you how to tie both, but obviously if you want to do a 5x4, you'll just still follow this tutorial, but you'll just stop at a, well, I'll let you know when you can stop. But if you're going to do a 5x4, you'll want 2 feet per pass. Now it depending on the size of the foundation, you might only need 2 or 3 passes. For a 5x4, you're going to need at least 3 passes. So if you're doing one color, then cut 6 feet You might even need 4. If your cord is too short to do any more passes, that's fine. I'm going to show you how you can add strands in case it's too short, or if you want to do multiple colors like this. But for a 5x4, general rule of thumb is you need 2 feet per pass. For a 7x6, you'll need about 4 feet per pass. So I'm going to do a 2 for the 7x6 for my whips. A 2 pass works just about right for most of my whips. So I'm going to do a pass of red and a pass of yellow. So first I'm going to cut 4 feet of red and feed it into my lacing needle. Now I'll go ahead and show you how to tie the knots. Okay, so go ahead and take your paracord and your lacing needle, and we're going to start just like we did with the transition knot. Try to get this in the middle of the frame here. Start by crossing it over like this, come up the top, okay, and then around the back, cross in front of where we started, and hold that with your left finger. Okay, so just like that. And then you're going to go around the back again, and then we're going to come up and go under this strand here. And carefully get your tangles out so you don't pull the knot out of place. Okay, so once you've gone under that strand, you're going to come just around the back again like this. And then you're going to go under this strand. The strand that first crossed over our lead strand, we're going to go under it again. So now we have 2 strands underneath 1 strand. And push this strand here, push it up to the top, because remember we're trying to do 4 sides on top here, trying to make a square. So now we have 2 sides of our square on top. Okay, so next, after we've gone underneath that strand, we're going to come up and go over this whole corner, and then we will come down the other side. So this corner here, I'm going to rotate the knot, and in the back we're going to come down and go under this strand here. Now again, hold the top with your finger. This gets very loose and it can very easily come undone. So you just really want to take your time with this. Okay, so turn the knot back around to the front where we have our lead strand sticking out. Okay, so once we've done that, we're going to go over the strand. This strand here goes over 2 strands in a row, including our lead strand. So we're going to go over that. And then we're going to come up to the top. And this strand here goes underneath 2 strands in a row. We're going to pull that strand down some. We're going to pull it towards us, and we're going to go under that to bring it up to the top. This part is really tricky to do without messing up the rest of the knot. So again, just take your time. Okay, so now we're back up at the top again, and turn this. So once we've come up under that, we're going to cross over this corner. Okay, so we came out here, we're going to lay this over just like that. Or I'm sorry, we're not going to go over both of them. We're going to go over this one and under the next one. And now we're going to descend. Once we come under that, you can see there's a strand here that goes over 2 in a row. So we're going to go over top of that, come down. This strand is under 2 strands in a row, so we're going to go under it to bring it to the surface. Because again, with any of these Turks knots, by the time you finish the knot, there should be all the strands or passes or whatever should be under, over, under, over. There should never be 2 overs or unders in a row. Okay, so now that we've gone under that, we're going to go over this and come under where our lead strand is, as if, like with the transition knot, like we're going to do a second pass and follow it. And that is a 1-pass 5x4 Turks knot. Now look up here at the top, you'll see it doesn't look like much of a square, so we're going to adjust it. Just very carefully bring the corners around in order to form a square. Pull these out, just carefully adjusting it. You might need to pull some strands a little extra tight, but again, you don't want to do it too much. Okay, so you can see we have our square. Now, if you want to finish it with a 5x4, then you can continue the second and third pass and however many more you're going to do. Again, make sure these strands that they come down below the base of the knot. Okay, so just check all the way around for that. Okay, so at this point, if you want to do another color on the 5x4, skip ahead. You can just skip ahead to where I finished the 7x6, and I'll show you how to add another color. I'll be adding a yellow strand, but first, I'm going to expand this into a 7x6. So I'll be showing you how to do that. So what we're going to do is follow this lead strand on the right side as if we're going to do a second pass on, like we did on the transition knot. Only now that we're at the top, we're going to go over these 2 in a row. Okay, over this corner like that. And then this lead strand that we followed on the right side, you can see it comes up, and on this corner it starts to descend. So just keep that in mind there. Okay, so we just came up, we're going to cross over a whole corner, and then we're going to follow the lead strand, only this time on its left side. So now we cross over this corner, then come to the left side of the lead strand and go under this. And now we're just going to follow it on its left side, going down the knot. Okay, so we're staying on the left side of the lead strand. It goes over, we go over. It goes under, so we go under. And we come back to the beginning, and this time we're going to go up the knot splitting strand. So you can see that we have this strand here is going over 2 strands in a row, so we're going to split that by going over it, and we're going to follow up in between these strands. You can see there's a strand underneath 2 in a row, so we're going to split that, go under it, and bring that strand to the surface. Now you'll notice this leaves a pretty big gap here at the bottom. Don't worry about that, just leave it kind of loose like that. We're going to fix that at the end of this. Okay, so continuing up, we have this strand going over 2 in a row, so we're going to go over it. And then back up at the top, you can see where these 2 strands crisscross. This strand here runs under both of them, so let's split these 2 strands, go under this bottom strand to bring it up to the surface. Okay, just like that. And now, this is the tricky part of where to find to go next. Once we came out under it, try to find this next one. We're going to go over this crisscross, and then we'll end up going under and follow the strand on its left side again. So go over this little X here, and then under, I'm sorry, we're going over this whole thing. Okay, so we're going to go over this strand. See how this strand on top, it's going over everything and it's kind of loose. We're going to go over that, but then this strand here, we're going to go under. Okay, this one right here. This part can be very confusing. I'm trying to go slowly so you can see what I'm doing. Okay, so it looks like we're just kind of spiraling a strand around them. It's going to look pretty sloppy, but that's actually how it's supposed to look for now. So once we've done that, we're going to descend and see how this strand here, it goes over 2 in a row. So we're going to go over it. And then a strand here comes under 2 in a row, so we're going to split those strands and bring this one up to the surface. Just like that. Go over this strand, come down to the bottom, and this strand goes under 2 in a row. So we're going to dig it out, bring it up, and now you can see where this loose loop down here at the bottom, now it's fixed. And now you're just going to come under where the lead strand started, as if we're going to do a second pass. Okay, so for now, I'm going to take my lacing needle out because I'm done with the red. So that's a 7x6 Turk's head knot, 1 pass. Now it looks pretty sloppy, so we need to do some adjusting here. We're going to start with the top. It's supposed to be 7 or 6 passes, or like, 6 bites. So we need to make a nice even hexagon. So just even out all the sides. Kind of adjust them, slide them around, and adjust it. Just to make a nice even hexagon. You can see it coming together there. Okay, it's not completely perfect, but you can see they're pretty evened out. So now just go around the rest of the knot and kind of even up the squares. They don't have, of course, you're not going to get them perfectly even, but make sure they each have a fair amount of space between each of the squares. And again, if there's any twists in the strands, you know, untwist it, follow it out to the end. So at this point, I'm going to put in my secondary color. And so if you're going to do another color, or if your strand is too short to do another pass, this is the part that's going to help you. I'm just going to cut, leave an inch or so, and measure out my yellow strand. Again, it's 4 feet for one pass of the 7x6. And again, make sure that the loops on the bottom are catching the bottom of the heel knot foundation. Just check around the bottom here and make sure they all come down and hook under there. So go ahead and feed your other strand into your lacing needle. And we're just going to, as usual, follow the lead strand on the right side all the way. We don't have to worry about changing sides or lead strands or direction or anything anymore. It's just following it all the way around on the right side, doing everything it does. So to go in and start, you can see where we finished off our last strand. Just come in on the right of it, pull it up to where you have about an inch sticking out, and just ignore this and just follow the lead strand on the right side. It goes over, we go over. It goes under, we go under. Okay, make sure you get that pulled out of the way. And I actually should have done it the other way around. Go in on the left side, or in between the two strands there. So there's no gaps or anything. There. Okay, so that's how you want to start it. Go in between your lead strand and the finishing strand. Okay, so just follow this all the way around. Don't pull it too tight or it'll slip out. But as you get farther around the knot, you can pull it a little more snug, but don't worry too much about that, because at the end of the knot we'll adjust it and follow it all the way through, pulling everything as tight as possible. Get a nice solid knot. You definitely want this knot to be very tight, because it's what you'll be gripping all the time with the whip. and it goes under a lot of wear and tear. So it's important that your heel knots are very tight. Okay, so I finished the last pass. Just cut this so it's out of the way. Alright, so you can see here that two passes is enough for my knot. Now you may see some tiny little gaps in your knot. Again, we haven't quite finished this. We're still going to tighten all the strands, follow it all the way through, but you can also adjust the opening at the top. If you open it up more and push the strands down to the sides, that actually takes up more space and will fill in those gaps. So you can push these out as much as you want, just don't get it over the edge, of course. Okay, so now we're going to go through this whole knot and tighten the strand. So start with your first strand on the first pass and do just like we did before. Just pull through each pass, pull out any of the slack, and there's going to be a lot of it at the end of this knot. So just start off, don't start off pulling too tight because it'll pull the starting strand out. And you're just going to follow this all the way around for all the passes. Okay, so I went through the whole knot, pulling out all the slack. You can see it looks much tighter and overall much better quality. The strands are all flattened out. So now I'm just going to trim these, melt them down, and then we can roll the knot. Make sure you give each one a good tug before you cut it. Okay, so now we're ready to give this knot a light roll. And again, whenever you roll the knots, don't put all your weight into it. Just give it a light roll. And Then once you've done that, normally I like to just kind of tap the ends of it. You don't need to put very much effort into rolling a knot. And just tap the end and take your board and slide it down to hit the edge of the knot. Just turn it. So once you've done that, the whip is just about finished. Now we're just going to wax it and then put on the cracker. Now again, waxing isn't 100% necessary, but it does make it much better quality, so I highly recommend that you do that. Okay, so I went ahead and melted my wax in this cooker, and again, make sure you're using paraffin wax, and I have about 10 pounds in there. And you want it to be, once it's melted, you want it to be about 200 degrees. Don't go too hot, especially to the point of boiling, because you'll basically end up deep frying your whip. So once you have it all melted, you're just going to take the whips and carefully put them in. And if you're not very experienced with wax, melting it or anything, make sure you wear some old clothes or something, because paraffin wax does not come out. I've tried it many times before, and also make sure you're doing it over an area that you don't mind wax getting on, because as you can see here on the deck, it doesn't come out either. Okay, so I'm just going to let these soak until the bubbles stop. Usually it takes about 15 or 20 minutes. Make sure the whole thing is submerged. The falls are going to try to pop out. If some of the fall, like this here, does, that's fine. You can usually just poke it back under. I usually like to tuck it under the whip so it holds it down. But again, if that sticks up a little bit like that, that's fine. Okay, so at this point, just going to let them soak, like I said, till the bubbles stop, and then we'll come back to there. Okay, so it's been about 15 minutes, and the bubbles have pretty much stopped. There's one or two spots where there's just some tiny bubbles coming out slowly, but I'm not going to worry about that. That's fine. These whips have soaked up plenty of wax by now. So you're going to want some paper towels handy, and also you're going to want to prepare something to hang your whips on, because once we take them out, we're just going to hang them up to dry. So, and at this point you can go ahead and turn off your wax too. Just grab the handle, and we're just gonna wipe off all the excess wax so it doesn't build up and flake. Just go all the way down the length of the whip. And just do this a couple times over. Make sure you really rub in around the corners of the knots and everything. then I'm just gonna hang this up to dry. Okay, so I just took some paracord and looped it through a rope up here I have on a tree branch, and just tie just 2 overhand knots, and loop the whip handle through. Okay, there we go. And you'll notice your whips want to bend, so just kind of straighten them out there. And check anywhere for any pools of wax on your whip that you need to wipe off. And your whips will feel very stiff after this, but that's what we want. So just gonna let them hang here to cool for 10 or 15 minutes. So while we let those cool, we can go ahead and make the crackers. Okay, so when I mentioned at the beginning of the video, you'll need either nylon thread or the paracord gut to make the cracker. I'll show you how to make it with the paracord gut first. I'll just use some nylon thread for that. You're going to want to cut a piece about 2 feet long, and if you have hemostats, clip the end of it, and all you're going to do is hold the end here and just spin it, just like that. Doing it the wrong way here. So just do this several times until it starts to twist on itself, and then you're just going to grab the middle in your teeth and then grab the end, like both ends like that, and you'll just let this go and let it twist on itself. Now, I didn't twist it all the way, but you're just going to do that, and then you'll tie the knot, which I'll show here in a second. But to do it with the sinew, or the nylon thread, we're actually going to double it over several times. So get about 3 feet. I just like to do a bow draw length. Do that, and then just double it over. Run it up to the end here. And you're just going to keep doubling it over until you have 6 strands. And whenever you finish, you should have both ends, the starting end and your finishing end, at the same end of the cracker. So we'll go ahead and cut it. And you can see here that where I started and where I cut it off, both of those ends are at the same end, and then we have 2 loops. So we have a total of 6 strands, okay? And the total length of this whole thing is about 3 feet. So take your hemostats and clip the end. And for either cracker, if you don't have hemostats, you can just put the end in a vise, get a pencil, loop the other end over it and twist it, or use a drill with a hook or something. Any method to spin it works. So just grab the end and spin your hemostats. grip this, my fingers are too cold. Okay, so once you've done that, just bite the middle. Bring both ends together and then let go. And just kind of run your thumbnail down across to smooth it out, because there will be some bumps and stuff along the way. Okay, so now you can just pinch this end here, take your hemostats out, and we're going to measure it out. And the best length for a cracker to fit on any whip is if you have the twisted portion to be 8 inches and then the tassel to be 2 inches. Now whenever you tie it on, it takes up about ½ an inch or so off the length of the cracker. So I actually measure mine out at 9 inches. Okay, so I measured out 9 inches for a twisted portion, so I put my hemostats on at the 9-inch mark. Go ahead and unravel the loose ends here into 2 separate strands, each made up of 6 individual strands. So now we're going to tie the knot. So let's see if I can get it a little bit closer here. Okay, so this knot is a small blood knot. So take it and lay it like this with your hemostats. You have the twisted portion up here and then the 2 strands. I'm going to take the bottom strand and we're going to come underneath the twisted strand, or the main body of the cracker, and then all we're going to do is loop it around once, like we're going to do. It's basically an overhand knot, but then we're going to do that again. So we'll loop it through one more time, just like that. So it's kind of like a double overhand knot. So once we've done that, we can just grab both ends, pull until it tightens up on the hemostats there. So once you've done that, grab both ends of what will be your tassel. Okay, pull them tight. Then you can take the hemostats out, grab the twisted portion, and pull. Okay, so you should have a tiny knot like that. So now we're just going to cut this tassel end off at 2 inches, so it's 2 inches long. Okay, so what you should have now is a cracker with a twisted portion being 9 inches, 8 to 9 inches, and then the tassel being between 2 and 3 inches. So now we can go ahead and put the cracker on the whips. Okay, so to put these crackers on, all you do is untwist the end of the cracker here to open up a little loop. Okay, so it'll just look like that, and just put it over the fall and then close it back up. Okay, just like that. And then just tie a simple overhand knot. So just go around the fall and through, just like that. Pull it up, leave about 1 millimeter of the fall sticking out like that. Pull it tight, and then do an overhand knot one more time. And I always like to put my crackers on the whips while they're still cooling, while they're hanging. It's okay to do that. Okay, so there's one. I'll show you again. Just untwist the end here. Just open up a little eye. Feed the fall through it to close it back up, and tie 2 overhand knots, or half hitch knots. again, don't pull it to the very tip of the fall. And pull it as tight as you can. Alright, so now I'll just finish letting these whips cool and they will be done. Okay, so congratulations, your whips are done. I just pulled them off of the loops. They're all cooled off now. So all that's left now is to test crack them.